On No Treason, number 6, written in 1870, Lysander Spooner says, "It purports at most to be only a contract between persons living 80 years ago. Only a small
Yes.
portion, even of the people then existing, were consulted on the subject, or asked, or permitted to express either their consent or dissent in
Right.
any formal matter. And the Constitution, so far as it was their contract, it died with them." What is he talking
Yes.
about here? What are the most important contributions of Lysander Spooner?
He is talking about, he is using the English common law structure to argue against the legitimacy of really of all governments, but specifically the constitutional government. So the theory of why government is just in our current, democratic republic that we have, basically, is, well, it has the consent of the governed. That's what makes it just. Like, if you really try to drill down into the basics of why we should even tolerate people taking from us against our will and telling us how to live, it's, well, once you get past the pageantry and the badges and the medals and the marble buildings and the grand writings on parchment and all this stuff, and really drill down to why we should take any of this seriously as being anything other than just organized crime, we are told, well, it's because they have the consent of the governed. They have our consent. And he's arguing they never had our consent. Everyone who's watching this, and I can't see it, I can only see if Keith does it, raise your hand if at some point you were asked if you were okay with the constitutional system of government or whether you wanted to opt out.
My memory might be fading, but I'm going to
Yes.
say no since it's just you and I.
Yes, and I doubt anyone else did either, unless you actually, and even for those who, because I've had people say, well, I swore to uphold and protect and defend the Constitution when I joined the military or when I ran for office. I go, okay, did they ever give you a chance to opt out of it? And I don't mean opt out of swearing in to protect and uphold it, but opting out of living under its rule. If the answer is no, which it is, they never got your consent. What he was talking about is when the Constitution was founded, it only got the consent of a majority of those who were consulted. The people there did not, the average person in what is now the U.S., or what was considered the U.S. back then, or the continent, the former colonies, were never given a chance to opt out. They were never allowed to do that. At best, they were allowed to elect politicians who were then able to decide whether or not they wanted to ratify the thing. But that's different from being able to opt out from all of it. And the reality is, back then, only white landowning males were even able to vote. But even if everyone was able to vote, even if every single person, including the slaves, were all allowed to vote on whether or not they wanted to have it, only those who voted for it would have been able to say that they had their consent. Anyone who voted against it, it was forced into it. Now, let's go even further, Keith. Let's say that 100% of every single human being in the colonies, including the natives, voted in favor of the ratification of the Constitution. All of them. Every single one. There wasn't a single dissenter. Everyone read this document and went, my God, that's the best thing I've ever seen. Where do I vote? Yes, yes, yes. Okay? They're all dead. Their children are all dead. Their grandchildren are all dead. Their great-grandchildren should all be dead. We are many, many, many generations removed from the people who, as we know, the vast majority were never even consulted. But even if every single one of them had been consulted and in their totally informed, uncoerced state, they said, yes, I want this, it still wouldn't speak to you and me. We did not consent to this system. And if anyone other than government tried to tell you that you had to live under an agreement by them, by virtue of the fact that you were born within their presumed jurisdiction, they would go to jail for racketeering and extortion and threats of violence and, and Ponzi scheming and a myriad of other things, because that's blatantly false. Using their own legal framework, it is false to say that anyone has consented to this. We were never given an option. Consent only exists if you are allowed to say no. We often say the difference between working for someone and slavery is having the option to say, I don't want to do this. The difference between consensual sex and rape is saying, I don't want to do this. The difference between paying someone and being robbed by someone is the difference, or giving to someone or being robbed by someone is the difference whether or not you are allowed to say, I don't want to give this to you. If you're not being told that you have an option to opt out, not leave, but stay where you are and opt out and live as you see fit, harming no one else, then you did not consent. And there is no consent of the governed when an opt out isn't given.
Exactly. Frederick Bastiat said, if every person has the right to defend, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, then it follows that a group of men have the right to organize and support a common force to protect these rights constantly. Thus, since an individual cannot lawfully use force against the person, liberty, or property of another individual, then the common force, for the same reason, cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, liberty, or property of individual groups. So if you have a security force, make sure you've only delegated rights to them that you yourself have. That's what I love about Bastiat. What is your favorite thing about Frederick Bastiat and his book, The Law, written in what, 1850?
It was published in 1850. It was written sometime around the 1840, the French Revolution. So it was believed that it was written between like 1845 and 1848. I love Bastiat, or I love The Law because can you just show them how thin that book is? It's such an easy read. You can read it like it's like you can read it on the bathroom. Your legs might be a little numb when you get off the toilet, but like you can.
This is the new edition with Walter Williams's forward, so it's thinner than this.
Yeah, it's thinner than that. Just the basic without. Usually, it has at least one or two forewords to it just to give it a little bit of something to it, because it's such an easy read. It's such a quick and easy read. And one of my other favorite quotes from it, and I always mess it up, is the delusion of the day, or this is the delusion of the day, the idea of enriching all classes at the expense of one another. Like basically you're grouping people up, you're making them fight each other, and then you're convincing each one that you're going to rob everyone else to give them something, when reality is you're just robbing everyone and skimming from some of the top. What I like about the quote that you said is it really speaks to the core of what we talk about. John Stossel did this once to a congressman or a senator. He said, "Do I have the right to or do you have the right to rob me?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Do you and I have the right to go and rob someone?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Do you and me and like 5 other people have the right to go and rob someone?" And he went into this and he said, "Why do you, as a politician, have the right to take from me?" And he said, "Well, because the people have bestowed the power to me." And he said, "So then I don't have the right to rob you, but I have the right to empower someone else to rob you." And he started, "Well, our system is blah, 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 and we'd have anarchy with that." If you don't have the right to do something, then you don't have the right to do it. And you sure as hell don't have the right to tell someone else to do it. Imagine if it were legal to hire a hitman. Well, you didn't kill him. You just bestowed that right onto someone else. That's our social contract, Keith. That's essentially what we have. That is the justification of government. And again, I am more than happy to work with minarchists, constitutionalists, people of all political stripes on working to dismantle authoritarianism and to put power back in the hands of the people. So this is not a hill I wish to die on in terms of libertarian circles. There are some of the greatest activists that are in our party and our movement are minarchists. So
Jacob Hornberger.
Jacob Hornberger. I mean, so perfect example. When I was knocking on doors in housing projects, guess who was right next to me?
Really?
Jacob Hornberger. Yeah, he was there with me in 2 of the times that we did it. So, and Justin Amash is an incredible minarchist. There are many incredible minarchists in this party and in this movement, and I certainly don't want to disparage them or anything like that. But let's be very clear about this. If you don't have the right to rob someone, if you don't have the right to impose your will on someone else, then you do not have the right to empower someone else, or you can't delegate something you don't have. So you can't delegate theft, extortion, kidnapping, murder. You can't delegate these things to a different group and to someone else or to some other group. Any manifestation of government has to have some level of coercion and theft and control, or else it's not a government, it's a voluntary community group. Like it's not, or at least it's not a state. It might be a form of government, but it's certainly not a state. A state has a presumption that this is our set of standards and you have to comply with them, and it doesn't matter if you like it or not, you simply have to. The most that you can do is participate in some electoral system we create for you to put the people in charge to decide who controls those levers, but you can't actually dismantle the levers because that's treason. Okay, so which is why Lysander Spooner's book is called No Treason, because if there's no moral justification for the thing, then there is no treason to it. There is simply the refusal to comply with it.